Sometimes in life, you don't realize how much of yourself you're giving away until you feel drained, unappreciated, and stuck in one-sided relationships. The truth is, knowing the signs early can save you from wasting your time, energy, and heart on people who will never truly value you. The first sign that you're giving too much to the wrong people shows up in the way you feel after spending time with them, and it's one of the most telling signals you can't afford to ignore. You start to notice that instead of feeling uplifted, encouraged, or understood, you leave their presence feeling like a weight has been placed on your shoulders. Your energy feels drained, your mood shifts downward, and you begin to question yourself rather than feel secure in who you are. This is not just a coincidence or a bad day, it's a pattern that begins to repeat itself until eventually you realize that the exhaustion isn't because of what's happening in your life, but because of who you're giving your life to. Relationships, whether friendships, family, or romantic connections, are supposed to add balance and strength. They are supposed to challenge you in ways that help you grow, not in ways that make you shrink. When every conversation feels like a battle, when every interaction leaves you depleted, you're not just giving time, you're giving away pieces of yourself that you can't easily get back. Think about it. When you walk away from someone who truly cares about you, you should feel seen, heard, and valued. You should feel like the time you gave was matched with their presence, their attention, and their willingness to pour back into you. But with the wrong people, it's the opposite. You walk away questioning if you matter to them, wondering if you're doing enough, and carrying the heaviness of their issues while they barely acknowledge yours. They leave you carrying emotional baggage that isn't yours to carry. And because you care so deeply, you don't even notice at first how much it's costing you. Slowly, you begin to feel worn down, less motivated, and less hopeful, because energy is contagious. When someone consistently drains yours, you lose the spark that makes you feel alive. This exhaustion doesn't always scream loudly at the start. Sometimes it whispers in the form of dread before you meet them, or the heavy sigh you let out after leaving. Sometimes it shows up in the way you feel unmotivated to answer their calls, but guilty if you don't. It can creep in slowly, and before you know it, you're constantly tired, mentally and emotionally, without realizing they are the root cause. Giving too much looks like showing up even when you're running on empty. It looks like silencing your own needs just to maintain peace. It looks like thinking you can fix their problems if you just give a little more of yourself. But the reality is, no amount of giving will be enough for someone who is committed to only taking. The wrong people have a way of making you feel like your worth is tied to what you can provide for them. If you give, they stay. If you stop giving, they distance themselves. That's not a relationship, that's a transaction, and the price is your well-being. You start to think that being drained is normal, that being exhausted by someone you care about is just part of love or loyalty. But it's not. Love doesn't consistently leave you depleted. Respect doesn't leave you questioning yourself. Loyalty doesn't leave you carrying everything alone. It's important to notice how you feel when you walk away from someone, because that feeling is the evidence you can't deny. If every time you leave you feel less of yourself, that's a sign you're investing in the wrong place. Your energy is valuable, your time is valuable, and the people who are right for you will never leave you feeling empty after giving to them. They will meet your effort with effort, your care with care, your energy with energy. But until you recognize the exhaustion as a sign, you will continue to pour into people who see your giving as endless, and they will keep taking without ever stopping to realize the damage it's causing you. The second sign that you're giving too much to the wrong people is when your needs are constantly invisible, while theirs are always front and center. And it's one of the clearest indicators that the relationship is built on imbalance rather than mutual respect. You find yourself rearranging your schedule, setting aside your priorities, and bending over backwards just to make sure they're comfortable, while they rarely, if ever, stop to ask what you need in return. It feels like you're living in a world where their happiness, their comfort, and their goals are the only ones that matter, and you're left in the shadows hoping that maybe one day they'll notice the effort you're putting in. That day rarely comes, because people who only take don't suddenly wake up and start giving. They stay in a cycle where they benefit from you, while you quietly sacrifice for them. At first, you might not notice it because giving feels natural to you. You care, so you step up. You want them to feel supported, so you put yourself second without hesitation. But over time, the weight of always being the one to sacrifice starts to catch up with you. You notice that you're tired, that you've lost track of your own priorities, that the things that once mattered to you are constantly pushed to the back burner. You look up one day and realize your entire schedule has been shaped around what they need, while your needs remain unspoken, unattended, or dismissed. The wrong people are comfortable with this because it benefits them. They have learned that you will keep giving, that you will keep putting yourself aside, and they take advantage of that without guilt. This sign shows up in small moments that add up to a much bigger pattern. Maybe it's always you making the drive to see them, but they never offer to meet you halfway. Maybe it's always you checking in to make sure they're okay, but when you're struggling, silence is all you hear. Maybe it's you putting in the effort to celebrate their wins, but when it's your turn to shine, they can't even be bothered to show up. These are not coincidences. They are evidence. Evidence that the balance is missing, evidence that your giving has turned into something they feel entitled to, evidence that the relationship is not built on equal respect. And it goes deeper than just actions. It's about how they make you feel when you finally speak up. Do they listen? Do they care? Or do they turn it back on you, making you feel guilty for even mentioning your own needs? With the wrong people, the moment you ask for the smallest thing, suddenly you're too demanding, too needy, or too much to handle. They minimize your feelings because the focus has never been on you. It's only been on what they can gain. This is how you know the imbalance has become toxic. You are not being seen as a person with equal value. You are being used as a source of convenience, attention, or support. The truth is, in a healthy relationship, your needs won't feel like interruptions. You won't feel guilty for expressing them, and you won't feel ignored when you share them. There will be room for both of you to be heard, cared for, and prioritized. But when you're giving too much to the wrong people, the relationship is never about partnership. It's about servitude. You end up carrying both your needs and theirs, while they only focus on themselves. Over time, that imbalance chips away at your confidence and self-worth. You start to believe that maybe you don't deserve to be prioritized, that maybe you should just keep quiet and keep giving. But that's not true. The problem isn't that you're asking for too much, it's that you're asking the wrong person. Your needs matter, and anyone who truly values you will make space for them without making you feel guilty or invisible. The third sign that you're giving too much to the wrong people is when you find yourself constantly justifying their behavior, excusing their actions, and defending them more than they would ever defend you. You become the person who covers for their flaws, who explains away their mistakes, and who convinces yourself and others that they didn't mean what they said or did. Deep down, you know their words cut too deep. Their actions were careless, or their neglect was unfair, but you build excuses around them because facing the truth would mean admitting they aren't treating you with the respect you deserve. This is where giving too much becomes dangerous, because it blinds you to reality. Instead of seeing their behavior for what it is, you start carrying the weight of making them look better than they are, as though it's your responsibility to protect their image, while they have no concern for how their behavior impacts you. It often starts subtly. Maybe they cancel on you last minute, and you explain it to yourself by saying, "They're just busy." Maybe they forget something important to you and you tell yourself they have a lot on their plate. Maybe they speak harshly and you justify it by saying they were stressed. Over time, these small excuses pile up until you've built a wall of defense for them, one that not only shields them from accountability, but also shields you from facing the hard truth that you're not receiving the same loyalty in return. Because when the roles are reversed, they don't defend you. They don't explain your actions in the best light. They don't protect your reputation or soften your flaws. Instead, they let you stand alone while you've been doing everything possible to keep them from standing alone. The dangerous part of this pattern is that it tricks you into thinking you're being loyal, compassionate, or forgiving. And while those qualities are beautiful when given to the right people, with the wrong people, they turn into chains that keep you stuck in unhealthy dynamics. Loyalty becomes blind devotion, compassion becomes self-neglect, forgiveness becomes permission for repeated mistreatment. You give them room to make mistakes without accountability, and in return, they take advantage of that room to keep repeating the same patterns. You justify behavior that shouldn't be justified, all because you want to believe they're better than the way they're treating you. This constant justification also creates a cycle of self-doubt. You start questioning your own standards, wondering if maybe you're being too sensitive, too demanding, or too harsh. You minimize your feelings because you've become so used to protecting theirs. You hold their mistakes in silence while carrying your hurt privately because speaking up feels like betraying them. But the truth is, by not speaking up, by excusing their actions, by continuously defending them, you're betraying yourself. You're betraying the part of you that knows you deserve respect, that knows consistency matters, that knows actions should align with words. Think about how much energy it takes to always be the one explaining away someone else's behavior. It's exhausting to be their constant defender while no one is defending you. It's draining to rewrite the narrative in your head so it feels less painful, when in reality, the pain is evidence that something is wrong. And while you're busy doing all this emotional labor, they're free to keep living as they please without ever having to face the consequences of how they treat you. That's not balance. That's not love. That's not respect. That's you giving too much of your energy to someone who has no problem watching you carry all the weight. Over time, this habit of justification wears you down. You lose sight of what's acceptable and what's not. You start to tolerate things you swore you never would. You begin to normalize disrespect because you've convinced yourself it's not that bad or that it will get better. But deep down, you know if someone else told you the same stories you tell yourself, you would tell them they deserve better. The problem is, you don't give yourself the same honesty because giving too much has blinded you to your own worth. And until you stop excusing, stop defending, and stop justifying, the wrong people will keep proving to you that they don't value what you so freely give. The fourth sign that you're giving too much to the wrong people is when the effort only flows in one direction, and that direction is always you. You're the one who remembers the little details. You're the one who shows up when they need someone. You're the one who makes the call, sends the message, plans the time together, and carries the weight of keeping the connection alive. Without your consistent energy and attention, the relationship would likely fade into nothing because they aren't putting in the same level of care. This imbalance is exhausting because effort is what keeps relationships strong. And when you're the only one putting it in, you start to feel more like an option than a priority. At first, it may not feel obvious because giving comes naturally to you. You take pride in showing up for people, you find joy in helping, and you don't mind putting in the extra work. But over time, you notice that the same energy isn't being returned, and it leaves you questioning why you're the only one who seems to care about holding things together. You plan the coffee dates, you remember their birthday, you send encouragement when they're struggling, but when you need that same level of attention, it's not there. You're left on read, you're left waiting, you're left wondering why you always have to be the strong one. The truth is, relationships should be reciprocal, and if they aren't, you'll eventually find yourself depleted from carrying both your needs and theirs. This one-sided effort is easy to spot when you take a step back and measure the balance. How many times have you been the one to reach out first compared to how many times they've initiated? How often do you compromise your time to fit into their schedule compared to how often they make space for you? How many times have you gone above and beyond just to make them feel supported compared to how often they've gone out of their way for you? When the answers are always lopsided, that's not coincidence, that's a pattern. And patterns tell the truth about where you stand in someone's life. The danger in always being the one to give effort is that it starts to create resentment inside of you. Even if you don't admit it right away, you begin to feel unappreciated and undervalued. You might smile through it, but deep down you're keeping count of how often your effort is unmatched. That resentment grows because giving without receiving is unsustainable. Human connection thrives on reciprocity. When that's missing, it feels like you're pouring into a cup with no bottom. No matter how much you give, it's never enough because nothing is coming back to refill you. And instead of feeling connected, you feel empty. Another sign of this imbalance is that you start lowering your expectations just to avoid disappointment. You stop hoping they'll check in on you because you've accepted they probably won't. You stop expecting them to remember important details because they never do. You stop asking for more because you've convinced yourself it's easier not to be let down. This lowering of your standards is not a reflection of what you deserve, but a reflection of how little they are willing to invest. And the longer you stay in this cycle, the more you begin to believe that one-sided effort is normal. It's not. Healthy relationships may not always be perfectly balanced, but they are never consistently lopsided. What makes this sign even more damaging is that it can make you question your own worth. You start wondering if maybe you're expecting too much, if maybe you're not interesting enough for them to put in the same energy, if maybe the problem is you. But the problem isn't you. The problem is that the wrong people will gladly accept your effort without feeling the need to return it. They're comfortable letting you do all the work because it benefits them. They get the attention, the support, and the loyalty without having to contribute anything in return. That's not a partnership, that's dependency, and it leaves you drained. When you're the only one putting in effort, the relationship becomes a performance where you're playing both roles. You're the giver and the sustainer while they simply exist in the space you've created. And no matter how much you convince yourself it's fine, eventually the truth catches up with you. Effort that isn't matched will always lead to emptiness because no matter how strong you are, you cannot keep pouring without ever being poured into. The fifth sign that you're giving too much to the wrong people is when guilt starts to creep in every time you try to set boundaries or simply say no. And this guilt is not a natural response, but a learned one that comes from being around people who have conditioned you to believe that your worth is tied to your availability. Instead of being able to protect your time, your energy, and your peace, you feel like denying them access to you makes you selfish, unkind, or even unloving. The wrong people thrive on this dynamic because it keeps you locked in a cycle where you are constantly accessible to their wants while your own needs remain neglected. This guilt becomes the invisible leash that pulls you back in whenever you try to take a step toward protecting yourself. At first, you may not even realize what's happening. You say yes automatically because it feels easier than dealing with the weight of their disappointment. You cancel your own plans, give up your rest, and stretch yourself thin just to avoid the uncomfortable tension of telling them no. It feels safer to sacrifice than to stand your ground because you've learned that when you put yourself first, they withdraw affection, make you feel ungrateful, or accuse you of changing. Over time, this trains you to silence your boundaries before they're even spoken, and you begin to confuse being agreeable with being loving. But true love does not require you to abandon yourself, and true respect does not disappear when you assert your limits. The guilt of saying no often shows up as over-explaining. Instead of simply declining, you feel the need to give long explanations, to justify your decision, to prove that you're not being selfish. You replay conversations in your head, wondering if you sounded too harsh, if you should have softened your words, if you should have just given in. This constant self-doubt chips away at your confidence and keeps you stuck in the role of giver, always bending, always adjusting, always available. And while you're busy battling guilt, the other person remains unbothered because their needs were met, often at the expense of yours. What makes this sign even more damaging is that it teaches you to ignore your own internal alarms. You feel the exhaustion, the overwhelm, the frustration, yet you push those feelings aside because you don't want to upset someone else. You convince yourself that being needed is the same as being valued, but they are not the same. Being needed means they rely on what you provide. Being valued means they respect who you are, including the times you need to say no. The wrong people blur this line because they don't want to lose the convenience of your constant giving. And as long as you feel guilty about setting boundaries, they know they'll always have access to you. This dynamic can spill into every part of your life. You say yes at work when you should protect your time. You say yes in friendships when you should protect your peace. You say yes in family dynamics when you should protect your sanity. And slowly, without realizing it, you lose pieces of yourself to obligations that don't serve you. The more you give in to guilt, the more you disappear in the background of your own life. You become the dependable one, the strong one, the selfless one, yet behind closed doors you're exhausted, drained, and quietly resentful. That resentment grows each time you ignore your inner voice in order to silence someone else's disappointment. The truth is, boundaries are not walls, they are doors. They don't shut people out, they teach people how to treat you. Saying no is not rejection, it is redirection, guiding the relationship into a healthier balance where both sides are respected. But when you're giving too much to the wrong people, they don't want balance, they want access. They want your yes every time. And when you resist, they manipulate that resistance into guilt. And if you're not careful, you start to believe that guilt is proof you're doing something wrong, when in reality, it's proof that you're finally doing something right for yourself. Boundaries are not a sign of weakness or selfishness, they are evidence of self-respect. And the wrong people will always make you feel guilty for them because they benefit from you not having any.